Well, hello and welcome to the Skyblues Fans TV, and I'm Claudio. And with me tonight, I'm joined by football finance expert Kieran Maguire, and we're going to have a quick Q&A about owning your own stadium and what it all means. Now, Kieran, as a lifelong Brighton fan, you'll know exactly how I felt on Saturday when the news dropped. Both Brighton and Coventry have been through the same tough times, both saved by British owners, and for me, that's a massive plus. It's great to see local businessmen stepping up, investing in their clubs, putting something back in the community and local area and the game itself. So I suppose, good evening, Kieran. Thanks for taking time out and joining us.
Thanks very much.
It must be great for you to come onto a football podcast twice in just a few months, and actually it's positive.
It is. I'm often seen as the Grim Reaper of football finance because, unfortunately, I've spent far too much time in recent months talking about Morecambe, Southend,
Yeah.
Sheffield Wednesday. Now, two of those have resolved themselves, hopefully for the better. But there's a few that are sort of floating into my in tray. And the good news for the Sky Blues is that they're not one of them.
Yeah, this is fantastic news. Now, I've got a few questions here, and some of your answers may actually answer some other questions. So we'll see how we get on. But when I heard the news, 9 o'clock in the morning, I was about to do my own little radio show, and I read the news. I thought it was a hoax. I don't know why, but it's the last thing I expected. And most Coventry fans straight away thought, what are the immediate benefits of Coventry City Football Club now that they own the CBS Arena outright rather than renting?
Well, I guess the first thing is that you save yourself a rental cost, although that will be replaced with the maintenance costs of running the stadium, which perhaps were being borne by the Fraser Group. So that's a start. But I think the main benefits are that Mike Ashley got his fingers burnt at Derby County when Derby went into administration. Ashley wanted to buy Derby County Football Club, but their owner had separated football stadium from football club and therefore was in a position where he could dictate terms. If he didn't want a potential owner to come in, he just quote them a crazy figure for rent. So Ashley went away, having learnt from the experience, and he's a very divisive character. Some people have got huge admiration for his business success. Other people, perhaps less so, for his business methods. But Mike Ashley does learn. And he says, well, if another owner can do this and make a bit of money, can I do the same? He acquired the CBS Arena for around about 17 to 18 million pounds. And he's sold it for 40. So he's done well at it. Now, he's spent some money since then. On the stadium, there's no doubt about it. But I think he's still worked out how to flip a bit of real estate and make some money out of it. So that's sort of where we were. What are the benefits to Coventry City? Well, now every minute that you are on the concourse, every minute that you are in the stadium, potentially is a minute where Coventry City Football Club can be generating revenue off you. But also they can be generating money off other people. Now, you know the stadium far better than I do, Claudio. But I think it's fair to say there are hospitality issues in terms of generating money. You can have conferences there. We've seen gigs take place there. And that used to go to the landlord. Well, that money will now go into the accounts of Coventry City. If you are selling pies and pints, well, the profits now go to the football club as opposed to the landlord. So all of these are significant pluses. That also goes into your PSR calculation. I think Doug King, if you're not singing his name, if you're not giving it a bit of the Doug King's Blue and White Army or Blue Army, you should be, because I think he deserves a huge amount of credit for this. It's taken a couple of years to get this deal over the line. Many, I wouldn't say weaker people, but many less determined people would have perhaps thrown in the towel. So I think he deserves huge plaudits for what he's done in getting getting to where we are today.
I was in the VPs on Saturday, and he walked out of his the boardroom area and it was almost like Julius Caesar walking out of the Colosseum. It was magnificent. I felt like he should have gone on the pitch, to be honest, and take the applause, because we've got a song for him, and it's well deserved at the minute.
Fantastic.
There was a lot of smiling faces on Saturday, and we're the same age, Kieran. I was almost in tears Saturday morning, because it's like it's a relief. Basically, it's the one concern I've had, and a lot of fans have had in the last few weeks. We had a meeting recently with Doug, where he talks a lot of the supporter groups, and he kind of was dismissive of the £10,000 fine that the EFL were going to put on us if we didn't get the deal sorted on the rental by the end of August. And that did have me wondering why he was so like, oh, it's only £10,000. But, so obviously something was going on for a very long time, and it's great news. Now, could this acquisition impact the financial fair play, profitability, sustainability metrics? If so, how?
Potentially, in the sense, I think there's opportunities to increase revenues. And for people not familiar with the PSR rules, Cov are allowed to lose £39 million over 3 years. Now, that's £39 million of PSR losses, as opposed to the accounting bits. You have to do various adjustments. The club actually is in a very strong position from a PSR perspective, on the back of player sale profits in the last season or so. So this can only help. So for people not familiar, profit is the revenues you generate, and clubs generate revenues from 3 sources: ticket sales, the TV deal, and commercial. Ticket sales is based on the feel-good factor, as we all know. You'll get your hardcore turning up regardless, and then you've got sort of the floating fan base. Well, there's a feel-good factor around Cov at present. So I think match day income will be at decent levels. Broadcast, you're in the lap of the gods, in the sense that it's centrally negotiated by the EFL. That's worth about 10 million a year. Match day was 10 million a year in 2024. Perhaps it will tick up a wee bit, but there's limited scope for that. But I think that the biggest opportunity is to increase commercial income. So those are your 3 income sources. Then you've got the costs of running the club. Infrastructure costs are excluded from PSR. So let's say that you have another meeting with Doug King, and he says, what are your feelings about safe standing? Because you couldn't have that conversation before, because the stadium belonged to Ashley. So he might say, well, okay, we're thinking about doing safe standing, and if there is overwhelming support for it, and having experienced it twice in the last week, because Brighton have moved to safe standing behind one of their goals, and they've also got it at Everton. I was there on Sunday afternoon. Many of us stand when we should sit, but now we can stand, and it's more comfortable, and B, it's safer. So I think those positives, and you make more noise because you're standing.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned, sorry, Kieran, the safe standing, because we've put safe standing in, and I think to the cost of us. I think Doug King's paid for everything and the improvements on the pitch. It's almost like Fraser's group weren't doing it. We were doing it all the improvements around the ground. We've got brand new digital ticketing access points. So it did feel there was a shift, that this was on the cards.
I mean, it could be that there was some form of tenant's lease whereby the tenant had to pay for improvements. And Mike Ashley benefits from that, because he's got an even better product to sell from Fraser's to Doug. So again, plaudits to the owners for going down that particular route. So you've now got the stadium to use. Now, do you want to use it? Can you negotiate with the council for a couple of extra gigs in the summer, make some money from promoting those? Can the commercial department now go to prospective weddings, conferences, evenings out, and say, look, if you do this and you're a Cov fan, 100% of this is going to the club? And I think that's quite a good selling point. So I think that there's opportunities there. As far as the costs are concerned, I mean, the rent was around about £1 million a year. It seemed to sort of bounce up and down a wee bit, but that's £1 million which isn't having to be incurred anymore. and you do have the greater freedom and flexibility as to how the stadium's going to be used.
Now, the weird thing is, it's obviously the CBS Arena. This was a deal struck with Wasps. It was a 10-year deal, which I think Frasers have took on, and we must be 3 or 4 years into it now. So potentially, Doug King could do another deal, couldn't he, with somebody else and bring somebody else in? Or do you think they might be tied down to 10 years regardless?
If I was a lawyer, I'd probably say it depends. It really comes down to the small print of the contract between the Fraser Group, Mike Ashley, Wasps, and so on. So I really couldn't comment, because without seeing the contract, I'm just talking out the backside, which I'm accused of on a regular basis, I can assure you.
Is that normally when you're watching the football?
Yes, yeah. I try not to talk about football anymore, because A, I don't know much about it, and B, I also work for the PFA business school, so I teach footballers, and I see them in a completely different light, because I see them as my students, as opposed to that useless right back, or he's a dirty so and so because he's always diving. And yeah, we are very we are very one-eyed, I think, as football fans. So yeah, I've made a conscious effort to not comment about football these days.
So, from a valuation standpoint, then, how might owning the stadium affect the overall valuation of the club?
Well, if you are looking to sell something, you're looking for the package. If I'm a prospective owner, what am I trying to do? I want certainty. I want to de-risk things. So if Doug King wanted to go down the route of selling the club, and there's no evidence that he does, I think he's absolutely loving it at present. He can now go to a prospective owner and say, I can sell you the intellectual property of Coventry City, which is effectively the badge, but also the share that they have in the Football League, EFL, whatever you want to call it, which has substantial value, and I've got the real estate. So that adds to the overall value. Clearly, it's cost him a fair amount of money to buy the stadium. So has he had to borrow, or has he had to put in his own cash? You've got more assets, but potentially you've got more liabilities, more responsibilities as well. So it will certainly help a prospective owner. I'm never keen on those arrangements where football club and football stadium become separated. And it's not just from what I've seen at Derby. I've seen it at other clubs as well. And if you've got a split between the two, especially if you've got split owners, they can start to operate on their own agendas. And it's always good, in my view, to have everybody rowing in the same direction.
Well, that sort of leads me on to my next question, because I was going to ask, with Doug King being the sole owner and the only one on the board, is this a big risk? If Doug's empire collapses, how would that affect the club in itself and the stadium? And also, we are presuming the club and the stadium are being kept separate. Is there any benefit to that in doing that? Or should they be as one, as you've just been saying?
I think if they've got the same holding company, that's good. From my understanding, and I'm just looking at my list here, because there's lots of things that arise on Companies House. So for those people who've got a personality and a life, this isn't something I waste my time on, but I haven't. So today there's been some new companies set up: Coventry Arena Opco, Coventry City Propco, Coventry City Retail. So there's 3 new companies which have been set up, which will be operating, and they will be under the umbrella of Coventry City Holdings, in effect, or whatever the parent company is called. And that's therefore not a problem if you're going to sell the holding company. So I support Brighton Hove Albion. Brighton Hove Albion have got a football club. Brighton Hove Albion Holdings have got a football club, and they own the stadium as 2 separate companies. That itself is, in fact, quite a common issue. if you're looking to acquire the club, you actually tend to buy the holding company. There's tax issues and there's various accounting nonsense which can sometimes be beneficial if you separate out the two elements. But I don't see it as being a problem. So we've got these 3 new companies which have arisen today, and they will simply be means through which we'll be able to say, well, this is how much the stadium is making, this is how much we are making from retail, and so on. So it starts to get a little bit more light if there's enough information shown in those finances.
Does owning the stadium give you more power, buying power on the transfer market as well, or not? Or does it make no difference?
It's very, very marginal. We don't know whether there's interest costs if they've had to borrow to buy the stadium, so that's a negative from a PSR point of view. Certainly the annual cost of the stadium and what we call depreciation, that's excluded from PSR, so that's a relief. The additional revenues coming from mainly from commercial can help. So I think if I don't know the actual circumstances, but if Doug King has lent the money at 0% and he's effectively funded the stadium himself, then that would be an overall positive for a PSR. And we've got 5-6 days of the window left. You've had an absolutely amazing start to the season.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure Frank's been sort of WhatsApping Doug to say, "Oh look, you got the stadium. We've got the start to the season. Perhaps 1 or 2 more could be beneficial." Yeah, and that's the nature of football.
I think the fan base are doing that as well, actually. Do you reckon this might explain the 15 million that dropped into the accounts when we had you on the show last time?
It could be. I mean, it was. I'm just looking at my spreadsheet in front of me here. He certainly had been a beneficial owner. Now we don't know whether the football club has bought the stadium from Fraser Group or whether it's been one of these separate companies. So if it's the football club, yes, perhaps we can start to put 2 and 2 together. He's been a beneficial owner, and I often get asked to talk about sort of the different ownership models at football, which I've sort of divided into 4: profit, love, vanity, and insanity. And of the 4, I think that love is normally a good reason, provided you're capable of separating out the business side of the affairs from your emotional investment. There are owners in it purely for money. There are owners purely in it for their own ego, and there are some absolute whoppers out there who are very dangerous to the game. And hopefully, with a combination of better governance at the EFL and the arrival of the independent regulator, there's less chance of those people getting through. Although you'll never reduce it to 0.
Yeah. You mentioned the figure 40 million. Is that something you've heard? Is that a guesstimate, or is that out there in the open?
No, that's something I was reading an article from somewhere. So I may be wrong, but I'm pretty certain, having seen the administrator's report, Mike Ashley probably paid in the region of 17 to 18.
Yeah.
Has there been spending on the stadium since then? Yes, there has. Now, how much of that's come from Cov, how much of that's come from the Fraser Group, I don't know. Mike Ashley is very capable of generating a profit. He won't have sold it at a loss. He's probably still punching himself in the face that he probably sold Newcastle United Football Club at too cheap a price in the current market. He sold it for 300, and we're seeing small clubs like Crystal Palace being quoted at sort of 450, 500, only sort of 3 or 4 years later. So those are the figures that I've read. Where I've read them, I can't remember.
So regarding that, I mean, should the fan base have any concerns on how much was paid for the stadium, or even how even how it was paid for? And does this kind of deal have to be cleared with the EFL or the FA, etc.? Do they get involved with things like this?
No, this is independent. What will have happened is at the start of the season, all the clubs effectively show sort of a budget for the season. So this deal has been rumbling on for quite a considerable period of time, I can assure you. And I'm sure the EFL would have been aware of it just out of talking to people at the club and so on. So I think it's great that it's now crystallised. It's been put to bed. As fans, it's a dumb thing for me to say, given my sort of line of work. Don't worry about football finance. It's not why you fell in love with football.
No, not at all.
I went from Brighton to Everton on Sunday, and a couple of blokes coming me up asking me about amortisation and PSR and so. I said, okay, go and enjoy yourself. We go to football to forget about the struggles and so on. And I absolutely understand it from Everton fans' point of view, because they've been through a really tough time with their owner. But the sun is shining. Go out and enjoy it whilst it lasts, because if there's clouds coming, we'll deal with them in due course. Going back to your comment that Doug King's the only director, and is there a risk? Yes, there is, but there's always a risk in a business which is dominated by one individual. I'm a Brighton fan. Our owner stuck £400 million into the club. What happens if he gets run over by a bus tomorrow? Brighton are stuffed. But you can't go through life. You can't go through life by saying, well, I'm never going to go out of the house. It might catch fire when I've gone out. You just got to go and say, on the balance of probabilities, Doug's a successful, intelligent, forward-thinking business owner. We've got to put our faith in him, certainly. And I genuinely don't say this about all owners. He seems to have come in with eyes wide open. He's got a very savvy approach to the business, and that should be welcomed. I interviewed the new owner at West Brom, and I appreciate there might not be a lot of love between you guys and West Brom because they're not too far away. A couple of weeks ago for the show that I do, and he was a breath of fresh air. So there are good owners coming into the game, and I think you should go and put Doug into that category. Sisu wouldn't necessarily go into that pot as far as I'm concerned.
I've got to move away from saying just a couple of questions about football in general, if you don't mind.
Of course.
I was listening to your podcast, Price of Football, and there was a chat about shirts. And obviously, we've got a great deal of Hummel. We've got loads of stuff we bring out. The club shop is amazing now. What sort of profit do the club make on selling a shirt? So if you sell a shirt for £60, what do the club actually get from that?
Well, if you're selling it for 60, the manufacturing costs, and I have spoken to some kit manufacturers and people in the world of textiles. The manufacturing cost is somewhere in the region of £10 to £12. Then you've got distribution costs. You've got VAT, which is going to knock off 1/6 of the price. That goes to the government. It depends who sells it. So if it's sold in the club shop, you get the retail element of the profit, and so on. But the clubs, it tends to be that you've negotiated perhaps an overall fee. So Hummel might say, right, we'll give you 500 grand and you'll get 12%. And they'll get 30% and so on. So each contract is different. We've just seen Liverpool, for example, and Liverpool shirts were £85 with Adidas. Liverpool went from a deal with Nike where they got 30 million quid and 30% profit on every piece of merchandise sold, to one with Adidas where they're getting, I think it's 60 or 70 million, but they're only getting 12%. So you set up graphs and they sort of say, well, if we sell this number of shirts, we're better off. If we sell this number of shirts, we're worse off. But yeah, shirts are high margin items, and I appreciate that it's a sensitive subject, and there is the issue of kids wanting birthdays, new kits come out, Christmas comes up, and also fully aware that there are alternatives to the official merchandise, and those alternatives seem ridiculously cheap. So again, I think that gives you an indication as to the actual manufacturing costs are quite low.
So my other question is interesting, that because I heard you actually say about how certain clubs, if they want more shirts, if they're a big club, the chances are they will get those shirts.
They will,
And
yeah.
and sometimes our stock does run low, and you do feel like it looks like they're not manufacturing anymore because they obviously can't manufacture enough to make it sustainable, really. So I presume that's what happens.
That's right. It's a pyramid structure in the sense that the manufacturers will have their elite partners who effectively they get a phone call from Club X and they say, right, we're on it. So you'll get a certain level of service from the biggest clubs, and if we're honest, they're the clubs that the kit manufacturers are fighting over. And I'm also aware that on the Manchester United deal and possibly the Liverpool deal, Adidas are losing money on that,
Right.
but they don't care because they're getting Adidas in 190 different countries, going to how many millions of fans each week, and that's free advertising for Adidas. So they might even be losing money on the deal, and they recover that money because even if you might be buying a Manchester United or a Liverpool shirt, but you're going into the Adidas store, and when you're there, I'll get myself a pair of Sambas or get myself a pair of Gazelles, and it's seen as a magnet for dragging the traffic in. I think with Cov and Hummel, it's going to be less so. And I'm not being disrespectful. You're not at that top of their pyramid. You're not getting the elite level of service. It's a bit like in a plane. You've got first class, business class, premium economy, and economy, and it's exactly the same with the service which is offered by the kit manufacturers to the fans.
Doug King's brought in Nicola Ibbotson, and she used to be at PSG, and I think they went over last week to Hummel, and they're desperately trying to follow the PSG model of the merchandising. Because apparently they're one of the best at it. So it'd be interesting what they come back with.
I mean, it's amazing that I live down south and in Liverpool where I work, so I'm in London quite a bit as a result of that. And the fact that PSG have got a merchandise shop in London is indicative of how it has become, and I hate using this word, it's become an athleisure brand, and trying to move from selling just to hardcore fans, because I think as fans we're under the assumption that everybody loves football as much as we do. And there's for me that there's nothing worse to you get invited to. I'm going to a wedding in a couple of months, and I'm dreading it already. Because we don't know whether my fixtures will be transferred to a Sunday. But if it's not, I'll be there with a bottom lip hanging out. And then you sit down, and you're there with I'm there with the missus, and I don't like talking to strangers. And there'd be sort of I turn to my left and I go, "Hi mate, how's it going? At 3 o'clock, who's your team playing?" And if they say, "I don't like football, mate," I go, "This is going to be the longest 3 hours of the year because I've got nothing else to talk about." So there are a lot of people who do not like football. What you don't want to do is to cut off those as customers. So I think that Coventry as a city, and I'm a huge music fan, so I think the opportunities to have a crossover between the football club and the heritage of the music from the city. And I'm a huge fan of sort of two-tone and so on. It is something which is not to be wasted. I've just ordered the shirt of Dunfermline Athletic because it's based on an album cover by a band called the Skids, who were 1970. So we're men of a certain age, and we are seeing that sort of linking between music and bands and so on. So music and the sports industry. Oasis absolutely cleaned up with their partnership with Adidas during this tour. The amount of merch that's been sold it's been the deal of this decade, in my view.
Well, one of our favourite, biggest sellers, the two-tone shirt you can see behind me, which I know I've got a couple of friends who aren't even COF fans who bought it, but they're into the mod scene and the scar scene. They just bought it, and we've brought out loads more stuff now: tracksuit tops and t-shirts with the little guy on it, the Madness Man on it. Brilliant. I've got one last question because it is the transfer window, and now you mentioned about how much clubs are allowed to lose, and is it around 120 million in the Premier League over 3 seasons? Is that right?
It's 105 in the Premier League, and it's 39 over 3 seasons in the Championship. And looking at Coventry's figures here, over the course of the last 3 years, the club's lost 5 million, 6 million.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's on the basis of player sale profits in 23-24. I don't know who was sold in that season, but you made an awful lot of money.
Now, the figure 120 million to me seems quite low in the Premier League. Now, my theory is that this is to benefit the bigger clubs, and it prevents people like Bournemouth, Brighton, Fulham, and obviously Burnley coming up, not being able to sort of play catch up a bit. Do you think that's what's going on here? Why don't they increase it to give clubs a bit more of a chance to bridge that gap? Or is it too dangerous to do that?
I mean, they're still losing money. So how much they should lose, I think, it is part of debate. But the rules were introduced in 2013. They've not index linked them since then. Aston Villa did ask for an increase from 105 to 135, and that was turned down. I worked out, people that know me, I'm a nerd, I'm a dweeb, I'm a sado. But I'm never far away from a spreadsheet full of football finance. And if we take a look at the amount of money that's coming into the Premier League in 2013 and compare that to the amount of money that's coming into the Premier League in 2025, that loss allowance of 105 million should be around about 220 over 3 years now. But the clubs have voted to keep it the same. Now, that does make it far more difficult for those clubs who want to spend more. So I sort of describe them as ambitious stroke aspirational. Villa have got new owners. They've got 2 billionaire owners. We know that Newcastle United are owned by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund. Why can't they do the same as Chelsea and Manchester City? They're just on the wrong side of history. They're on the wrong side of the introduction of FFP stroke PSR. And that does seem very harsh. That does seem unfair for those clubs. So you can understand the frustration of the fans. And a cynic would say that this is due to preserve the sort of the glass ceiling that exists between the elite and the wannabes, because Manchester City and Liverpool and Manchester United, Chelsea, they can pay wages of 150 grand a week, and that's sort of the average wages there. Villa and Newcastle can't because of the PSR rules, even if they wanted to. So my argument has always been, well, it's your money. If you want to go and lose that amount of money, why shouldn't you? But what you've got to do is to protect the game. So if you want to go and spend an extra £200 million on wages, put that £200 million into a bank account now. So even if you walk away, the club's covered. And also perhaps to sort of do what we see in is it in MLB, in sort of United States franchise sports. If you want to spend above a certain level, you get taxed. You pay a super tax on transfers. There's ways of making football in the Premier League, and hopefully I'll be seeing you there next season.
It'd be fantastic. There is one last question though. Leicester City. Obviously, they've dropped down to the Championship. Are we expecting a points deduction? Briefly, do you know what's going to happen there?
I don't know what's going to happen. I think that there is a very high chance that they will be on a charge from the Premier League in respect of their losses for the 3 years ended the 30th of June 2024. So they could get a points deduction from the Premier League, and the Premier League and the EFL, whilst they don't like each other, they now have agreed that they will apply penalties awarded by the other, because historically they said, we can't do it, we're independent bodies. And I also think that there's a high chance that Leicester City Football Club could have be on a charge for the losses for the 3 years ended the 30th of June 2025, and that could come from the EFL itself. Now, we've not seen Leicester's account, so I'm doing a bit of supposition there. So there's a potential for 2 sets of points deductions which could arise in this season.
Oh dear. Being a rival, you know.
Yes.
Was that your feeling when you found out that Crystal Palace weren't going to be in the Europa Cup? Being a Brighton fan, or?
I'll be honest. My reaction is that Crystal Palace won the FA Cup. They beat Villa, they beat Fulham, they beat Manchester City, and whilst on the FA Cup final day, I was cursing at the television. Some of the refereeing decisions, sometimes they go your way, and I think some went the way of Crystal Palace, but they also saved a penalty. People forget that. And so my view, if you win the FA Cup, regardless of who you are, you deserve to be in the Europa League and all that brings. They're still in Europe. For the sake of saving you legal costs and me legal costs, I'm not going to say anything about any other club that might have taken their place in the Europa League.
Brilliant. Kieran, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to explain a bit more about the finances of football. Of course, you can catch Kieran on his own podcast, Price of Football with Kevin Day. He's a Crystal Palace fan, and you probably know him from back in the 90s, doing a lot of comedic stuff on the TV. And yes, he's a big football fan. It's good to have 2 football fans doing stuff like that, actually, Kieran. It's I think it's more enjoyable, actually.
It is. I mean, it's magnificent working with a professional broadcaster such as Kevin. People think he's a comedian, but remember, he did 10, 12 years on Match of the Day too. He's done Channel 5, Channel 4 cricket and Goodwood and so on. So he's a very experienced broadcaster, and he makes me look good because he knows when to take the mickey. He knows when to ask a follow-up question. He knows how to frame those follow-up questions, and then it just doesn't become a list. And he's also absolutely brilliant at being the bloke in the pub. So for people that don't know me, I work in university. We live in a completely bizarre world, and he's fantastic because he keeps me grounded, and he makes me work harder to explain things and to try to make the world of football finance a bit more accessible.
Brilliant. Well, I think if you're watching this, Sky Blue fans, I think you should give it a watch. I think you're going to be chatting about this deal, aren't you, in your next episode? Is that right?
Yes. Well, effectively, a lot of what we covered today will be condensed down.
Brilliant.
Because looking at my show notes, I'm recording the show tomorrow. I've got about 8 or 9 different stories, which we often say we're the only podcast that we know that wants to go out of business, because then there won't be the likes of Steve Dale and Dejon Chansiri and Lawrence Bassini and all of the crazies that are part of the world of football that we exist in today.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. I'm going to let you go now. And I've got a football match to go and watch. We're playing Millwall in the Carabao Cup.
Oh, right. Enjoy. All the best.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Play up Sky Blues.
Play up Sky Blues, yes.
Sky Blue Fans TV. For the fans, by the fans.